Thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased to propose this budget that despite another significant cut in government funding and having to save £1.5 million in the coming year, we've achieved a balanced budget, responded to residents' priorities, protected services and are investing in the future of Harlow. In the budget consultation, residents said that parks and playgrounds, grass cutting and litter were important. Spending in these areas have been protected, and in addition to the budget proposals, we're reinvesting efficiency savings within the care contract in new grass cutting tractors and increasing staff to make further improvements to how the green space are maintained, making a positive and visible difference to Harlow. Residents also said that regeneration of the town and economic development was important. So in addition to the significant progress being made on the enterprise zone, the improvements to the town park and freezing car parking charges, including the free hour to help neighbourhood shopping centres, this year we'll be creating a £1 million regeneration fund, along with funding additional staff to drive forward the regeneration of the town centre, investing in the future of Harlow. We also know from petitions, surveys, the budget consultation itself, and many, many conversations directly with residents, that Essex County Council's decision to turn off the street lights between midnight and 5 AM was deeply unpopular. While we would have preferred Essex County Council to invest in LED lighting to reduce energy and maintenance costs, we are responding to the overwhelming views of residents, and Harlow Council is proposing to pay Essex County Council to turn the lights back on, fully funded by a 1.5% increase in Harlow's element of the council tax, which will cost the average household just an extra 7p a week. Other measures in the budget have also reduced the cost of senior management and cut Cabinet members' special responsibility allowances, already among some of the lowest amongst comparable councils, by 5%. Finally, we are protecting popular services such as the paddling pools and Pets Corner, giving funding until at least 2019, and have increased the funding for Contact Harlow, making it easier to get in touch with the council. I'd just like to thank council staff and my colleagues who worked hard to get to this point, which is a very positive result. This is a budget that responds to residents' priorities, invests in the future of Harlow, and will make a positive and visible difference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the budget amendment which takes into account the big issues and concerns that are facing the people of this town. So for the first time in 5 years, the Conservative group is not proposing a freeze in council tax. We are instead proposing a 0.5% cut in council tax. Unlike the administration, who talk about the cost of living, then stuff hard-up households with a 1.5% increase in the council tax bill, the Conservative group is doing their bit to help the hard-working people of this town with the cost of living by proposing a cut in tax. We're able to propose this reduction in the council tax while at the same time maintaining much loved and needed frontline services.
Absolutely.
We've been able to do this by accepting the government's council tax freeze grant of £75,000. And as well as accepting the savings set out by the administration, we have gone further in finding efficiencies in the following areas. It may surprise many that this council spends tens of thousands of pounds on magazine subscriptions each year. We feel this is a luxury that the council can ill afford at this time, and so we would reduce the sum spent by about £4,000. We would reduce the chairman's allowance to the 2013-14 levels, saving a further £4,000. We would reduce the contribution to the severance budget by £50,000. We would close the council's in-house reprographic service and finish the job that Labour has so far unsuccessfully been able to do, and that is move to a paperless council. They've been quick to buy the latest gadgets, but they've been slow to deliver on real reform.
Absolutely.
Reform in this area would net this council a gross saving of over £90,000. Contact Harlow, the face of this council, which should be supporting residents seeking advice and guidance about the authority's services, is currently under severe strain. Residents have been left feeling frustrated, angry and let down because the service has been so badly under-resourced by this administration. Mr. Chairman, we would seek to redeploy staff from the reprographic service to the much under-resourced Contact Harlow to increase our ability to respond to the needs of residents in this town. In total, Mr. Chairman, we have identified approximately £200,000 of additional savings in conjunction with those of the administration without affecting a single frontline service. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move on. The influx of illegal encampments that has swept over our beautiful green town this year grieves me deeply and is a major concern to many residents. The people in these encampments have caused disruption to local residents, have cost this council a fortune, as we've heard this evening, to clear up, yet no provision whatsoever seems to be made in this budget. Now, this is a vexatious issue, so let me be clear at this point. My words are not an attack on the travellers, many of whom live and work in this town. My words are an attack on lawlessness. They are an attack on this administration, whose attempts to punish those who break the law has been lame in the extreme. It cannot be right that people are allowed to trespass, willfully flight it, churn up our green wedges and leave human excrement on the highway and expect someone else to pick up the tab. This kind of behaviour should not be tolerated in a civilised society. This group is therefore proposing to increase the funding to the Safer Community Team by a sum of £60,000 to give them the resources they need to collect the evidence and bring to book the people who are destroying our local environment, our home. Mr Chairman, the Conservative group will not tolerate double standards when it comes to the application of the law.
Yes.
Our response to this problem will be fair, even and robust, and we are prepared to provide the resources needed to tackle the issue. Mr Chairman, when we were in administration, we worked closely with the voluntary sector. We propose to do so again by working with the town's Rotary Group, a group that does a great deal to promote business and charitable work. We believe, as they do, we can significantly increase the amount we receive in sponsorship from the town's roundabouts. It is precisely this kind of partnership working that will help to secure our town's facilities in the future. So in the first year, we conservatively estimate that we could generate an additional £6,000 in income from this area. Income from this and other remaining savings, we would invest in the town's parks and playgrounds, whose budget has been cut this year by the administration.
Yep.
The choice to the electorate this May is clear, Mr Chairman. Vote Conservative for a 0.5% cut in council tax. Vote Conservative to see our green space reclaimed. Vote Conservative to see the law fairly applied. Vote Conservative if you believe we should invest in children's parks and playgrounds. Mr Chairman, we should...
Third year I've been in this chamber to listen to an alternative budget from the group opposite. 2 years ago we had the make-up and spend budget. I think I described it at the time as not so much an alternative budget but an alternative set of unsustainable assumptions. Last year their ambitions seemed to be gone and accepted the vast majority of this administration's proposals, but introduced a few items from the Eric Pickles play book. This year, again, they've accepted many of the good things that this administration is proposing in the budget, turning streetlights back on, investing in the future of Harlow. But there is a common theme running through all of these three budgets that I've sat in this chamber through, and that's about not being sustainable. It's about not looking to the future. So, their big proposal of cutting council tax by 0.5%, which is partially funded for 1 year only by a £75,000 grant, bribe, whatever, from central government. But looking forward, that will have an impact on every year subsequently. In the period of the mid-term financial strategy that's before us today, that would mean that in addition to the several £1 million savings we already have to find in future years, we'd have to find another over £500,000. So this administration has got a balanced budget. It's going to pay for the streetlights being turned back on in a sustainable way and not take short-term decisions that are simply designed for a headline with the next political leader.
The mantra of the vapid entry party opposite.
Here.
What they say, we've had a consultation on the budget. And the council leader says, this budget has been driven by that consultation. Now, the single biggest issue highlighted was streetlights. So, Mr Chairman, let's have a look at that consultation, shall we? 2014 budget consultation, 4 results. Ah yes, streetlights. How many people mention that in that report, in that survey? Anybody tell me?
No.
Out of 1,029 responses? 500 people? 200 people? 50? No. There were just 36 people. 13 people. So Labour have been listening to a very small minority. So what were the big issues? Freezing council tax? Cutting council tax? Surprise, surprise, yes. A whopping 84% of respondents either wanted to freeze council tax or reduce it. So how were the majority listened to? Where are their views in all this? What was the point of the consultation if you're just going to ignore it? This was an issue picked up by the peer review group and neatly sidestepped by the party opposite last week at Cabinet. Is it any wonder that the public are becoming cynical of politicians? Oh yes, we're listening, you say. But clearly you, on your side, are not. In our amendment, we show we have been listening. With a bit of effort, a bit of research, and a bit of imagination, we can maintain frontline services whilst cutting council tax. Councillor Clement just now said that they're all sort of non-sustainable. But as Councillor Perrin has already mentioned, it was your policy to begin being a paperless council. Well, if you're going to be a paperless council, at some stage you will have to get rid of reprographics. Otherwise, the policy falls apart and you don't save any money. When it comes to the elections in May, people will remember who listened and who responded.
Yes.
Year on year of Labour tax rises and worsening services, or the Conservative years of tax freezes and improved services.
Shallow, it's meaningless, and it has no credibility within the real world of Harlow. If we actually look at the consultation that took place, yes, there was the online consultation that took place in the summer. We also have an excellent parliamentary prospective candidate, Susie Stride, who has actually presented a 2,000 signature petition to this council demanding that the street lights has been taken on. County councillors of this town have been repeatedly at full council making those demands on behalf of Harlow, only for the Tories to ignore it at County Hall. These are just some examples that actually demonstrate Labour's commitment not only to listen to local people, but to react positively, constructively and timely in this particular fashion. And I'm absolutely delighted, Chair, that the Conservatives opposite completely support us in our demand to have those lights put on. In relation to the amendment doesn't make sense because the former colleague who was the Cabinet Member for Regeneration and Enterprise did introduce the notion 12 months ago of his good friends, either the Masons or the Rotary Club, I can't remember which. But actually I met with some of these groups to see whether or not there were any other opportunities to raise additional resources for the benefit of the council. The simple truth is that couldn't happen because whilst the Rotary Club were happy to take over and manage the roundabout, any monies that were secured they wanted to put into a charitable pot that we were not able to assess or to say whether or not this was the right charity or not. We asked them to go away, they never came back. So it makes no sense, and this idea that companies are going to be paying £6,000 for a sign on a roundabout in Harlow is not suitable, sustainable or actually achievable at this particular time. The difficulty with this amendment is just it's a trick. It's a short term to get to the election quick. They want to turn the lights on, they want to get people elected, and then this time next year they're going to have to turn them back off. We have a sustainable, and this time next year they're going to have to turn them back off. We have a sustainable, we have the right agenda, we have the right mood to do this. We believe our agenda is the correct one, and this one fails at the first hurdle. It is a not for supporting amendment for this budget at this time. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Charles.
This amendment wouldn't have been presented tonight if the officers of this council thought that it wasn't able to sustain a budget for the next financial year. You listened to your officers to propose your own budget. They've said this amendment can go forward because in the next financial year it's balanced and we would be able to run the council on what we have proposed. One of the key tenets of our budget amendment is to tackle illegal encampments. People across this town are fed up that this council isn't taking enough proactive action to deal with them. We've set up a fund so that the community safety team can tackle those sorts of issues. Now, I am proud of a Conservative group that this year, with only a few weeks to look at the budget papers, was able to identify savings that do not impact on frontline services, that meant that hard-working residents in this town can have a tax cut. Our budget is sustainable, it is balanced, because we've looked at the figures, we've ensured that frontline services are protected, and we've ensured that much of community services have money in the pot for the future, and that's incredibly important. One other thing that they've missed is that we have recognised over months and months now the performance of Contact Harlow in dealing with residents' concerns is appalling. We've decided, with our move and reprographics, which we'll talk about in a moment, that we would actually create 2 new posts in Contact Harlow to deal with those issues. At the moment, the Labour administration has only employed individuals on a short-term 6-month contract. Our staff are there for the full year to deal with those sorts of issues. Where's the job security there? Exactly, Councillor Perry. What we've decided to do with reprographics is something that the administration have talked about but don't want to put any action in. In the 21st century, we're all moving to digital. It's all about ensuring that we move into a digital age and we scrap paper because it's a waste. What we've been able to do is identify savings that have meant that we can put that towards, again, a council tax cut for hard-working residents. Ultimately, our budget is about residents, putting them first. The consultation with residents, which led to they listened to, but they haven't, said quite clearly they wanted either a freeze or a council tax cut. We've listened, we've put into place measures to make their lives better. Only with the Conservatives will residents in this town get a voice.
First thing is that it is unsustainable. At the end of the day, the freeze grant is just for 1 year. If we actually look ahead, we'll actually find, if this goes ahead, from the figures that I've actually been given by the officers, we would actually find a cumulative deficit by the very important year of 2019-20, when we'll actually have to try and maintain discretionary services, of £578,000. That's wrong. I'd also like, hopefully, Councillor Perry to actually pick up the other point of the general fund severance budget, 50,000. Is that presumably year on year? And that, once again, points to the fragility of this freeze. Well, he can explain that then, can't he? I turn now to the streetlights. It's interesting that the Tory party are actually changing their stance on this. There was, oh right, okay, I just thought the way Simon Carter was actually talking about this, I thought you were. I presented, Chair, Susie Stride was there at Chelmsford in the gallery with a large representative of Harlow people demanding that our streetlights be turned back on. I presented a petition then. Next Tuesday, I have a further 2,000 petition to present, which I've told the Chair that I'm presenting, and I will be asking directly. We have had some indication, but not an official indication yet, that our streetlights will be turned on. Yes, we will have to pay twice, as somebody actually said in the audience, and I think that's very unfair. But what we have on the doorstep all the time, if our Conservative colleagues are going out and knocking on any doors, they would also hear what we're hearing all the time from your own supporters, signing our petition all the time. We're Conservative, but yes, we'll sign your petition to get the lights turned back on. Thousands and thousands and thousands of signatures have actually been collected to deprecate the idea that we're actually wanting to turn the street lights back on is just purely, simply wrong. We are listening, and we actually take into account people's opinions out there. So at the end of the day, this amended budget unsustainable. The figures produced here show that they're unsustainable. And in fact, what's more worrying is the years that we actually had the freeze in the past. How long will the freeze go on after the general election? That could amount to a further £400,000 to £600,000 that this authority, after the general election, will have to find, because you actually took the freeze grant instead of biting the bit and making sure that our finances are solid and reliable. So at the end of the day, Chair, this doesn't add up, and our budget does. So there we go.
Simple and quite honest, and I think this side of the table has been quite honest about what we're putting forward and what the future holds. Politicians of all parties sometimes accuse each other of having no plan B. What's clear here tonight is the Conservatives in Harlow have no plan A. What they simply have is another election gimmick ready for a leaflet to go out that doesn't talk about honesty or the future. Not one speaker that has spoken across from the floor has spoken about the future and what their amendment will cost this town. Councillor Perry's quite correct. It is balanced. It does add up this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
But let's be honest, totally honest. It will also cost this town, the residents of this town, well over £500,000 over the next 5 years. It will also, that's on top of the £1 million a year plus that your government is imposing cuts on this town and its residents. So please tell us when Councillor Johnson sums up, because no one else has had the guts from across the chamber to tell us, how are you going to save well over £500,000 with your amendment over the next 5 years? Which cherished services will have to go? How many jobs will have to go? Be honest about it. Don't just go into yet another unsustainable election gimmick. And that's all this is. What we have delivered, and I'll speak about this later when we talk about a proper budget and a sustainable budget, is what is right for the future of Harlow, not just a one-off gimmick yet again. Thank you.
For all my colleagues' feelings, I will not be supporting this joke of an amendment tonight. It is unsustainable. I care about the future of Harlow. I care about the future that's left for my children and their children. This leaves a massive gap. As Councillor Wilkinson said, your government are inflicting cuts year upon year. And I'm proud that for the second year running, we will not be making any job cuts. We will be sustaining and paying our council employees a decent living wage, which, by the way, the Tories at Essex County Council refuse to even entertain the thought of paying their employees a decent wage. And I will not have, on top of your millions of pound savings that we're constantly looking for, another £600,000. Where are you going to find that? We're committed to being long term. We want to turn the street lights on and we want to make it sustainable. We don't want them to go off next year. We don't want them to go off under a future administration. This is why it's increased and it will go on every year. Will you turn them off if you win this May then? Because you're going to have a massive gap. I think you're trying to take people of Harlow for fools. I think you haven't done your sums properly in the mid-term and long term. You're looking at short term. Funny that there's an election right around the corner, but I'm sure that didn't cross your minds at all. And quite frankly, I think your budget is for the polls, just like the roads in Harlow, and that's your responsibility too.
Councillor Danvers mentioned was the fact that we're not listening. In actual fact, I want to disagree with him. I think we're all listening to the results of the budget consultation that you had. I just feel that the party opposite has what my grandmother used to accuse my grandfather of. He only has selective hearing. He only hears what he wants to hear. And I think you've only heard from your consultation what your parliamentary prospective candidate has told you to listen to, the fact that the streetlights have to go on. We've listened to the other people as well. As Councillor Carter has said, 84% of the people in this town would have liked a council tax freeze or a cut. We've provided them in this budget with exactly what they want. We've also agreed with you that the streetlights should turn on. You've already spotted that. So I think we've listened properly to what the people of Harlow want, and the people of Harlow have asked for a budget that you see before you in this amendment, not one that's only partially listened to a very small number of people. Thank you.
First, it would give them a well-needed council tax cut, some tax relief, and the second thing it would give them is hopefully some additional support in dealing with the scourge of illegal encampments in our town. I think illegal encampments in our town are the biggest social issue. I've certainly knocked on a lot of doors in the last few months. I've been knocking on doors for 16 years. And I have not heard anyone in the last few months talk about more of an issue than the illegal encampments. It's what my mails are made up about, it's what my Twitter feed is made up about, it's what my emails are made up about. The people of Harlow are furious about the illegal encampments and the inability of Harlow Council, amongst others, alongside the police, to deal with these illegal encampments. The Conservative budget amendment tonight makes sure that there is additional funds there to ensure that when a future leader of the council is asked how many fines have been issued as a result of the council using section 77, the answer isn't none. The answer is we've actually nailed the illegal encampments with the fines relevant. And that money is going to be there to protect our green open spaces. Our colleagues here have talked about consultation, and we've heard that over 80% of council respondents to the council's own consultation wanted a freeze or a council tax cut. That is what this amendment provides. And then we come to Councillor Durkin. Shallow and meaningless. That's the words he used. Sorry, the words he used, not you, of course. Why would you possibly think that? And he talked about the sustainability of this budget, along with a number of others. Let me tell you something. It sounds awfully similar to when I stood in this chamber 5 years ago. There was a general election in the air, and we'd moved a council tax freeze. It was the second council tax freeze that us as a Conservative administration at the time had moved. And members opposite stood all night and said, it's unsustainable, you've got one freeze already, you can't move another freeze, and it will never last, there'll be a hole in the finances for the next 4 years. And the following year we were able to move a council tax freeze. And the following year in opposition we were able to find the savings and move a council tax freeze. And the next year in opposition we were able to find the savings and move a council tax freeze. And this year in opposition we've been able to find the savings and move a council tax cut. Do not tell me that my budgets are unsustainable. Yes, local government finance is difficult, and yes, we don't have a crystal ball and we can't tell what will happen in the next 4 years. But I am committed to continually finding the money to provide Harlow residents with a council tax freeze, to finally get Harlow council tax share down to a reasonable level, to make sure that they're not paying over the odds as they have done under years of Labour administrations. And talking about sustainability and whether whose sums add up, the Labour council opposite, 2 years ago in their first budget, turned down the government's grant to freeze the council tax, worth about £70,000. And that grant would have run for that year, the next year, and this year. And the next year they turned down a council tax freeze that would have run for that year and this year, £70,000 each year. And now they're turning down a further £70,000 of council tax freeze. Now the previous freezes have been built into this year's spending allowance. So if you'd have accepted those freezes, going into next year and accepting this freeze, you would have had, 70 plus 70 plus 70 plus 70 plus 70 plus 70. That's £420,000 worth of extra government grant that this Labour council has turned down because they're committed to raising council tax. Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to stand on my record. And my record in the last 6 years is moving budgets that have 5 council tax freezes and a council tax cut. I won't listen to the to the administration telling me that my figures don't add up, because they do. And what they add up to is less tax paid by the Harlow council taxpayer, more money to fight the scourge of illegal encampments that their councillors welcome in this town. That's what this opposition amendment does, and that's why I'll be voting for it.
About this council tax freeze, I've lived in this town nearly 60 years, and it was the worst I've ever seen this town with your freezes, because we know you cut the landscaping, the hedges, the roads were dirty, and this town has never looked so clean since Labour's been in.
Thank you. All those against? The amendment falls. So we return to the debate on the original motion.
In my view, is the big issue of our times, really. And I call upon national parties of whatever colour, really, to make sure that it's high on the agenda, because actually every person in this country and every person in this town deserves to live in a good house that's secure of good quality with enough rooms, enough space. And I know that within Harlow we seem to be pushing at the margins in terms of what we can do. I welcome self-financing, which has given us lots of opportunities, and I know that has cross-party support. I'd also like to thank colleagues both on this side and also councillors across the chamber, because I know that on the majority of issues within housing there is cross-party support on what we're trying to achieve. So I think this is an issue that in some ways for us locally we can achieve a cross-party consensus on trying to make sure that the housing in the town is as good quality as possible. One of our main priorities is more and better housing, but it's also about security. It's also about making sure that there is enough housing out there. So this administration has started to build council houses. So by the end of this year, there'll be 18 families who will be housed in the town as a result of building council houses. But also, I'm proud to have grown up in a council house, and I'm proud to have grown up in a council house which has given me the opportunities that I have had. But also, I believe in the right to rent, and the issue out there is that there's a lot of people, because of the lack of supply of housing, who are paying rents that are unaffordable, and that is really hindering people's life chances. As a teacher, I know that one of the issues for studying for students is the fact that there's not enough space in many people's bedrooms for them to study or to have a desk, and so therefore I firmly and passionately believe in council housing as an appropriate way forward in this country, not just in Harlow. We have 3,500 people on the housing needs register, but we're trying to do what we can in terms of building housing. We've bought some houses on the open market, and we will look and explore and find ways in which we can work with housing associations and also within our own gift as well in terms of trying to increase the supply of housing in the town. We've also looked at tenants' incentive schemes for people to downsize, not to be forced out of their homes where they have a secure tenure, but actually to be encouraged, if they are willing, with some incentives so that they can move and free up some valuable room space. The rent increase within these papers is below government guidelines at 2.2%, but also the rent increase which has been adapted to a local formula so that it represents the needs and aspirations that we have for people in the town. I just want to kind of stress here that we're trying to work on improving the current council stock. 1/3 of the housing in the town is council housing, and the issue that we're finding now is that we're really we're having new kitchens, new bathrooms, new front doors, tackling fuel poverty, insulation. We're going to have £50 million going forward in terms of external works as well. So there's a lot of achievements out there, and I know that there are some issues sometimes, but the overwhelming satisfaction out there is very positive. And for people to have new kitchens, new bathrooms and all the rest of it is really important so that people are in solid, good quality homes. There are challenges, and we will look, of course, through the scrutiny committee at how we can improve customer service and customer care and make sure that it is right as often as possible. But I passionately believe that we need to have more and we need to have better housing, but we are pushing at the margins, as I said, and we need government to tackle it, not just in Harlow, but in the country as a whole. So going forward over the next year, you'll see in the papers that what I want to do is increase tenant engagement and empowerment. We also are going to look at exploring ways in which we can extend the council house building programme, working with partners, also as a council lobbying national government so that we can have some of those issues I've spoken about tackled. But we're also going to be looking at refurbishing 3 of our tower blocks, and we're also going to be continuing with the modern homes. But it's not just about making homes decent, meeting the decent home standards in a couple of months' time. It's also about modernising housing, and it's also about looking for ways in which we can improve supply. So I'd like to recommend the housing sections within this, and once again thank everybody that has helped us with this journey, and to continue to challenge and to continue to make sure that we can do the best we can for the people of the town.
And it is time to change. It is time that we faced and we actually dealt with this issue that has been a thorn in the side of the wider community for a long period of time. So I'm actually very grateful, not only to the officers, but my fellow colleagues and comrades around the Cabinet table who were able to support this request to enable us to move forward on this one. And this is about real change, and no disrespect, it is not about plant pots. It's about real access, it's a real openness, it's a real opportunity. But it's also about challenges, about the future design and the structure of what a town centre should look like and what it could look like going forward as a legacy for the next 10 or 20 years. Now, this £1 million will not solve that problem at all. But what it does do, it allows us to start for the first time a really informed and important debate with all the key partners within the town centre to see whether or not, in the old days than when we had Harlow Renaissance, we can all get round the right table at the right time to make the right decisions for the wider community. And the importance about having this money is that it enables us to be at the front of that discussion rather than following the developers behind. It's also about new growth, and when we talk about new growth, we also talk about new employment opportunities as well. There's a lot of criticism made about a Labour government or a Labour administration that is anti-business. Well, this is a clear indication that this little council is open for business, is willing to do business, and wants people to invest in businesses in the towns. And I do assure the whole of the council that this, I'm hoping, will get cross-party support and we can work collectively on this one, because it's in everybody's best interest to win on this one. Clearly we can do something quite immediate, and I will be bringing a report to Cabinet in the next couple of weeks about some initiatives that we can get on and get sorted so that we're ready for the spring to make it feel a better place to go to. But we also need to get round that table to all our current partners, but all our future partners, to make sure this town centre is the best town centre, not only in Essex, but within this region. So thank you to my colleagues and my comrades, certainly to my friends of all persuasions in the regeneration team, who at times I know drive them mad and they drive me mad, but actually we're all in it to make a difference, which is actually making a difference to Harlow. And this budget is clear evidence that under Labour, this town is...
I wasn't going to refer to your comments last week at Cabinet. And in particular about the Housing Services Business Plan. There's a wonderful little document down here, only might just 68 pages. But I would recommend you all read it at some stage. Because a lot of time and effort actually goes into producing this report, by the officers, by the town reps, by the councils and so forth as well. And it does record, as well as looking forward, it's also recording the previous year. Over 99% of rent was collected last year through the housing staff supporting and working with their tenants. There's been no increase in homelessness applications over the past year, thanks to the housing staff and Streets to Homes providing intervention services. And if I may, which is not in there, but just because it only came out in December. But Harlow's council houses are the safest in the country. In December, Keir Harlow achieved a gas safety certificate for every single property with a gas boiler. Now, those of you who follow the housing press will be aware that quite a number of large housing associations are being hauled before the regulator because they are failing to maintain the safety of their properties. We have a very proud record. It's something that the Housing Repairs Panel picked up on several years ago, and we've been working very closely with Keir Harlow and the staff to actually get that done and to make our homes safe. It's a record which that they can all be proud of. Now, you may be thinking it's a bit odd for Conservatives to be going on about council houses, but remember, I'll be political for a moment, it was a Conservative-led government that actually introduced self-financing for the Housing Revenue Council.
Started off by Labour.
Yeah. but there's also a Conservative administration on Harlow, which set up the original 30-year HOA business plan, which included the repayment of the debt during that very clear interest in making sure this is rolling forward satisfactorily. I say every cloud has a silver lining. One of the impacts of the government's long-term economic plan is very low interest rates, from which the tenants will benefit for the remaining 26 years of the original plan. And another side effect of the recession was that the original contracts for decent homes were extremely competitive. We actually saved 10% or thereabouts on the original budget. So this in turn means that we can bring forward some of the lower priority items which Councillor Trud has already referred to, such as replacing single glazed windows and improvement of flats. But also a key priority, which I will echo, is completing work on the hard to insulate homes and tower blocks. It's the kind of thing that will make a real difference to a lot of people in this town. Again, why am I supporting it? Because they are our achievements as well. So the original 30-year business plan was worked up by this administration in consultation with the tenants, and they supported it. The underlying housing asset management strategy, which is another great read, was also developed by engaging with the tenants. This meant we could ensure that our priorities were their priorities. Consultation and engagement. Engagement and consultation. It's amazing what you can achieve when you work together. But sadly, consultation and engagement are just where this administration is going wrong. The peer group review focused on it because it was so poor. But what kind of administration is it? You have to investigate what you want to get out of community engagement. I'll tell you, a poorly performing one. This administration, a Labour administration, is having to employ consultants to sort out its tenant engagement. And this is from a party who claims that council housing is their turf. Well, but why are they having to employ and pay money to outside consultants? It's not difficult. All you have to do is listen and engage.
To publish a clear deadline on how it's going to meet its targets, what it's going to spend the £1 million on. It's very important that we see that, and I know that the administration recognise that, but we're very keen to engage on a constructive basis to see this move forward. One of the key things moving forward into the long term that I believe is very important for this council is for it to address its ICT issues. Quite often, I think budgets from all political parties that form the administration in this town have avoided the issue. And I think that on a cross-party basis, we need to get to grips with our ICT issues in this town. I think that we should look at alternative technologies like cloud computing, because I think the potential savings for this council, and I know that the leader is an expert in this, are pretty incredible. And I know that the government is pioneering cloud technology in its own government departments. So that's something I'd like future administrations to address. In terms of what the Labour administration has proposed for council tax, well, you know our views. I think that it's irresponsible to ignore residents' views in their own consultation. As we've said, over 80% of people said that they wanted a freeze or a cut. This administration has ignored their wishes and ploughed ahead of the plan to increase tax year on year. This is the third tax increase by Labour in succession. Under a Conservative administration, we froze council tax. There's a clear choice for residents there. One of the other things that I'm disappointed about in Labour's budget is a lack of investment in tackling illegal encampments. This is the biggest issue of the day for all residents in this town. I'm quite pleased I learned today that the travellers in Station Road and on Harlow have gone, thanks to Essex County Council's travelling unit serving the court papers and getting rid of them. But actually we've got to address this. We've got to be stronger in actually dealing with these issues. And actually our fund could have been used to protect green spaces in this town that we cherish. Green spaces and urban spaces complementing each other. That's what's special about Harlow. I think what also is important is that people recognise that we have to deal with the chronic lack of engagement by this administration. Contact Harlow is a perfect example of that. They've only put forward individuals to deal with the problems back of the drop call rate in contact, Harlow. You only employ people on 6-month contracts. What I want to see is full-time roles dealing with those issues. We've consistently said over a number of months that this needs to be addressed. We proposed something to deal with it, they've ignored it. Ultimately, what this administration is ignoring is the wishes of local people, people that have struggled, because ultimately we've had to deal with the issues of austerity across the country. And thanks to a Conservative government, we're coming out of that. A Conservative government is proposing tax cuts for thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And I just want to talk about streetlights for one moment. Our Member of Parliament has championed this issue. Yes, he has. And we as a group, as well as UKIP, all parties in this chamber signed a letter saying that we agreed that where appropriate, the streetlights should be switched on. And I think on a cross-party basis, big issues like that should be addressed across the town. Ultimately, what I want to see is a council that cuts taxes and addresses people's concerns. Labour are ignoring them. They've ignored them throughout the consultation. And what was interesting, only a week ago, we learned in the peer review, a number of councillors from across the country who come to assess a council, what did they say about this administration? They said rather than having a long-term view, they only have a short-term view about Harlow. They're the ones about election gimmicks, we're the ones about a long-term plan.
I welcome in the Labour Party's budget the £1 million as a discretionary fund for regeneration. He's quite right, Councillor Durkin. There is cross-party support, and I'm pleased to see that he's pushing the enterprise zone forward. I would say I'm equally pleased that the Conservative-led government has given the funds for this to occur. Without the Conservative government, the enterprise zone, shall we say, project would not have happened. Without the worthwhile work of our MP, Robert Halfon, working in partnership with the West Essex Alliance and the South East Partnership, and indeed our own very good officers, this town may not have got enterprise zone status. But I'm glad that we have cross-party support on that, and I'm really glad to see that they continue driving forward. It always amuses me that Councillor Durkin likes to make a little bit joke of the plant pops, considering that many people have forgotten that he also voted for them as well. So there we go. That's politics, I suppose. I'd also agree with the comments made on self-financing. Yes, you know, it's a good thing, and we need more homes being built. There have been too few homes built over countless generations, and we've already had a little spat about Labour and Tory, but it's good, it's happening, and I'm really pleased to see it going on there. But that's about it. I mean, that's the level of thought that's gone into this budget from the Labour Party. They failed to address the bigger issues that the town's facing. How many times have we heard Councillor Danvers and his cohorts bleating on about the cost of living? The cost of living is a problem in this country. And whilst the Labour administration cannot do an awful lot about that, the one thing that they can do, the small part of their world they can control, and they choose to ignore it. Year upon year upon year, they burden people in this town with council tax rise after council tax rise. 10 years, they've doubled council tax. 10 years. We're accused of it being a gimmick. Because it's an election. There's elections every year. Have they not noticed? There's elections every year in this part of the world. Is every year a gimmick from them and from us? We put forward, as Councillor Johnson and all my other colleagues have said, sustainable budgets over a long period of time. Our track record speaks for itself. How many times have they talked about the cost of living and then gone and want to slap a charge on car parking, abolish the free hour? It was this group over here that fought them on that last year, and they had to do an embarrassing U-turn and reinstate the free parking hour. That would have been a stealth tax on people in this town and a stealth tax on the businesses locally. And they had to make a public U-turn on that. How many times Do they go on about the cost of living? Under the last Labour government, income tax and fuel duty went up 12 times. Our own MP has lobbied consistently from day one, and fuel duty has been frozen. 25 million people in this country have benefited from a cut to their taxes. Councillor Danvers always looks perplexed by this, and I never understand why. He said, oh, it's the millionaires. 25 million people in this country are all millionaires. Now, I know he finds the number difficult, but that can't possibly be true. 2 million people taking out the basic rate of tax altogether. Every time they say something about cost of living, they do the opposite. But yet, judge us on our actions. Every time we do mention something about cost of living, we do something about it. They don't. And as my colleagues have said, and I've said previously, they've ignored the biggest issue that many residents have gone on about tonight. And we've gone on that. And that's the illegal encampments in this town. When will they wake up? When will they start using the legislation to its full? When will they actually do something about this? They're all about equity. They're all about fairness. They're all about everyone being treated equal. I don't see any equality here. If residents of this town went and did half the things that these illegal encampments are doing, they'd be held to pay. But no, they're allowed to get away with it consistently. They just move from one place to the other. Never tackled. They do not make it uncomfortable for this kind of activity to go on. And then the final one, decent wage. How many times do we hear about 0-hour contracts and giving people a decent wage, and they will only give people in Contact Harlow a 6-month contract? Where's the job security in that? Thank you.
Preparation of our budgets tonight. We don't praise our officers, our hard-working officers enough. Simon, I know we've inundated your email box from this side in the last couple of weeks with emails, with questions, with meetings, and I just want to say thank you for the help that you have given us. Councillor Klempner started this debate by saying he was happy to move the budget. If I was in his place, I would be ashamed to move a budget that gave a council tax increase to the residents of this town, and I will certainly not be voting for it. We've heard a lot about previous budgets and whose economic record you can listen to, and Councillor Klempner's made great pay of the fact that we've agreed with an awful lot of things that are in his budget tonight. Yes, we have. Let me look at just 3 items in that budget. 3 items that came up in the debate this time last year. The first of those is the first hour free car parking, which Councillor Perrin has just mentioned. Something that we as an administration put in, something that you as an administration when you came in scrapped. We moved an alternative budget saying, let's put the first hour parking back in for free. You said, no, it's a rubbish amendment, threw it out. And then a couple of months later, quietly slipped out that actually you changed your minds and the first hour in local car parks would be free. Second item, last year in our alternative budget, the last couple of years, we told you that the economic environment in Harlow is improving and you would be able to get more car park income from the car parks that we own. Last year you told us that's absolute rubbish, the economy's in the pan, double dip recession, Ed Balls, who can't even remember people's names, was spouting all sorts of rubbish. And you said, no, it's not going to happen, and you voted down our budget amendment and threw it out. This year, what's happened? Car park income has gone up across the town. And your budget this year includes an increased allotment for car park income. You see where we're going with this? Third item that I'll look at, councillors' allowances. Last year in this chamber, as part of the budget amendment, we suggested a cut to the cabinet members' allowances. You threw our budget amendment out, you said it was rubbish, you said the sums didn't add up. What happened a couple of weeks ago? You chose to cut cabinet members' council allowances. 3 items, just 3 that I've picked, that you ridiculed in opposition budgets that have all ended up in your budget in the last year. The £1 million fund to regenerate the town, absolutely you have our support on that. Absolutely you have cross-party support on regeneration of this town. That's been the same when we were in administration and you were in opposition, and I hope it stays the same when you're in opposition again next year and we're in administration. But let's look at why we've been able to have that £1 million regeneration. This year, the Conservative-led government that Councillor Danvers and others on that side want to criticise so much has given you £704,000 in new homes bonus. It's almost all of that regeneration money there in your pocket, bang, done. We've given the Conservative-led government, as Russell has said, has given millions of pounds of enterprise funding to this town, bringing more jobs and more growth to this town. Councillor Durkin and colleagues criticise the Conservative government, but he's quick to turn up to the photo shoot to get his smiling face in the paper, and when we're talking about the enterprise zone. A Conservative policy delivered, something lobbied for by our MP, Robert Halfon, to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I want to go back slightly and talk about the lights. We've already heard that Robert Halfon has been lobbying, just as we've heard that other people have been lobbying about the lights. Rob's the only one that's managed to raise the issue in Parliament. No other person has raised the issue in Parliament. You laugh, but at the end of the day, the MP of the town has raised it. But you've tried to make the lights tonight into a party political issue, and you know in Harlow it's not. You know that a few months ago you brought a motion forward calling on Essex County Council to turn the lights back on. There was an amendment moved by this party present, by myself, and supported by all three groups that where appropriate we'd turn the lights on. We also agreed we'd send a letter to Essex County Council explaining our decision. And we talked in that meeting at great length about the volumes of information that we had from local residents and how much evidence we had of each individual light that needed turning on. And Rodney Bassett told me that, yes, if you send us the evidence, we'll get those lights turned on. He's always said he'll listen to people. It took a month of chasing by myself and the UKIP group leader for the leader of the council to actually get a letter for us all to sign to the county council. It took about 5 different rewrites of the letter to get it to a stage where it could be sent. And then, what evidence has the council sent to county council since about which individual lights to turn on? Not the ones that we're going to pay for, but the county council will turn on for free. No evidence. There's been no evidence sent. And this leads me to question whether actually Councillor Danvers' much banging on about the lights is actually a political tactic. Does he actually care about the lights? Because certainly, I think the rest of the chamber does. But Councillor Danvers just seems to want to point score about the general election. He wants to bash the Tories at county council. And I know how much you hate the Tories at county council. And I'm sure the feeling is mutual. But in Harlow, there's a cross-party agreement. There's a motion that we signed up to. So don't stand in this chamber and lob across at me that it's us versus you on the lights issue. It's not. We put our name to a piece of paper and you know it, and anything else is just political gimmicks. I want to go back to the most important thing that's been mentioned in this debate tonight, and that's about listening to residents of our town. The council commissioned a report to ask people what they wanted to see in the budget. Over 1,000 residents, over 1,200 residents responded to that report in good faith and told the council what they wanted to see in this budget. Over 80% of those people that responded said, please give us a council tax cut or a council tax freeze. And the Labour Party, the administration of Harlow Council, have ignored that consultation. I'm proud to say that this side didn't ignore that consultation. We listened to residents of the council. We'll continue to listen to residents in this council. We'll continue to listen to the residents of Harlow. And I think you'll find at the ballot box in May, you will lose seats because you have failed to listen to members of the public. Mr. Chairman, I cannot support this budget. I will not support this budget. And I will not put additional tax burden on the people of Harlow.
The proudest moment at which point I'm proud of this administration and the difference Labour is making to Harlow, the visible difference. I'm so proud that in our short 2.5 years since we came into administration, we've started building the very first council houses in 25 years, and I will keep saying that over and over because God, I'm proud of that. I'm proud that we've pushed forward the decent home standard and we made it a reality that people in Harlow can have decent homes because that's what they deserve. I'm proud that we're a living wage council. I'm really proud of the corporate plan that we've now got in terms of when we put out our tenders, and I'm proud that we're putting pressure on our suppliers that are now paying living wage, and we will do everything we can to make Harlow a living wage town. I'm proud that we've saved discretionary services that were left in a black hole under the previous administration, and they can bleed on and on what they want, but their money dried out and we found it. We have saved them for the mid-term future, and we will work hard for a long-term future for much-loved discretionary services in our town. I'm proud that we put pressure on our contractors like Kier to up their game, to increase grass cutting and to make a difference visibly to how Harlow looks. I'm proud that we are investing in the regeneration of our town centre. I'm real regeneration to really make a difference. And do you know what I'm most proud of? Is that tonight we will no longer let the Tories leave Harlow in the dark, and that we will turn back on the streetlights. We will move that. Well, the Tories opposite said let's judge them on their actions. I'm happy to do that. I've got to say, I feel sick every time our Tory MP does a lack of victory about unemployment statistics and it dropping, when in reality we know that 0-hour contracts, part-time work and bad paid jobs.
6-month contracts.
I feel sick to my stomach every time it bleats on that it's okay and it's rising, because I tell you what, the people out there don't feel it. I will judge them on voting for the bedroom tax and inflicting a tax on the most vulnerable in our society. I will judge the Tories and our Tory MP for voting for budgets which have resulted in closing children's centres, axing youth services and making it real hard out there for the people in our country. I judge them for the increase in food banks, for one opening one every 3 days since they came into power, and that people, working people, are having to go and try and find the dignity still, going to food banks and relying on services they shouldn't have to. And I'm really going to judge them for leaving Harlow in the dark. Because let's face it, it was the Tories that turned off the lights. One of your Tory councillors that sits in this room often voted to turn them off, and it's funny he's missing again tonight, and he did on the motion. I tell you what, I think the Tories, both locally and our MP, do a very good job at talking the talk. Well done on him for saying a few motions on the streetlights and other bits, but he is aware that he can actually change law and vote to change it. I don't want someone that's going to talk the talk. I want someone who's going to make a real difference and actually change our law. So I'm proud that come May, people get a chance to vote. They'll get a chance to vote on our council and who we have as an MP. And I can't wait to have a fantastic Labour MP who will stand up for people, not just talk about doing stuff, but actually make things happen. And I'm so proud to stand here that under Labour, Harlow will shine again once more.
Councillor Toll's made me proud of what Labour have achieved over the last 2.5 years. But one thing I will say, I am very proud of what we have achieved in less than 9 months. So that's all I want to say. So, let's wait and see what happens in May, yeah?
Councillor Palin.
Newspaper, she reads. I must admit I don't read the Mirror. But this morning's Mirror reports that there are 151 people currently employed by MPs on 0-hour contracts. I rest my case. And they're Labour.
Minimal input into this year's budget process will be abstaining from the vote on the administration's budget recommendations, but will assure the council executive and the administration that we will endeavour to assist this council to achieve the budget outturn figure for the coming financial year for the good of our residents.
I don't think it's brief. Much has been said by the opposition. I'm just going to pick out 2 or 3 things to respond to. Councillor Johnson has made great play of the last 3 alternative budgets that proposed an increase, a freeze in council tax, as if that's some indication of sustainability. But clearly the only way he could do that was because it's built on a sustainable base of a budget that this administration put forward. He mentions the £75,000 grant. He doesn't mention the gap between that and actual funding requirements. So every year, if that had been implemented, adds hundreds of thousands of pounds to the challenges that this council faces. Councillor Charles and Councillor Perrin talked about Contact Harlow and made a big play of raiding reserves for £100,000 in reprographics to redeploy staff to Contact Harlow. sure anyone's actually read the budget papers, but if you're reading carefully, you will find that actually in our budget, we're increasing the staff by another 4 people in there. And also in the last few months, because the action that this administration has taken in terms of resourcing, things like drop-fall rate has dropped significantly and is now around 3 or 4%. The final thing in terms of a response, again, much play being made about travellers, and I absolutely understand that one of the biggest issue, if not the biggest issue in Harlow, is dealing with unauthorised and illegal encampments. But let me be clear that protecting our green spaces, that was raised by Councillor Charles, we're doing everything we can where it's practical, and that's not limited by the resources of the council. I've made it absolutely clear that we'll commit to the resources necessary to tackle that problem. In terms of the community safety team, the reason we haven't prosecuted people is not because of the resources, and again, I've made it clear we will allocate the resources appropriate. It's about having specific evidence that will stand up in court. It requires witness statements, requires signatures and what have you. We will continue to do everything we can under the current law and urge the law to be changed, and we are exploring actively longer-term options. This is not about resources, this is about the law, and I'll go to execute it. There's much else I could say, but I'll just conclude by saying this budget is a sustainable budget. It's a budget that invests in the future of Harlow. And yes, it does listen to the concerns of residents in terms of responding to their priorities around regeneration, around preserving our green spaces. And I commend this budget to the Council.
Colleagues, we now proceed to the vote, and I should just remind you that under recent legislation, this will be a recorded vote. Therefore, our legal officer, Brian Keane, will read out the names of individual councillors, and you are required to say for, against, or abstain as you choose. So I will pass you over to Brian Keane.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, if members please say for, against, or still abstain when I call their name. Councillor Beckett.
For.
Councillor Simon Carter.
Against.
Councillor Charles.
Against.
Councillor Churchill.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Kleffner.
For.
Councillor Danvers.
For.
Councillor Doyle.
Abstain.
Councillor Doku.
For.
Councillor Durkin.
For.
Councillor Foreman.
For.
Councillor Hall.
Against.
Councillor Holcoop.
For.
Councillor Andrew Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Jollies.
Against.
Councillor Livings.
Against.
Councillor Long.
Against.
Councillor McCabe.
For.
Councillor Odell.
For.
Councillor Paling.
Against.
Councillor Palmer.
For.
Councillor Perry. Against. Councillor Spooner.
Abstain.
Councillor Stevens.
For.
Councillor Toll.
For.
Councillor Truhan.
For.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Last but not least.
Okay.
Brian Keane will give the result.
Thank you, Chairman. There was 15 for the motion, 10 against, and 2 abstentions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Brian.